Hello and welcome to another edition of Kaleidoscope right here on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawadu.
On the program today, we sit with the founder and executive director of Women in Leadership Advancement Network WILAN, Abosade George Organ, to discuss the organization's impact.
Once again, welcome to the program. Women in Leadership Advancement Network WILAN began operations in December 2018, but let's tell you more.
Women in Leadership Advancement Network WILAN Global is a Nigerian-based global organization focused on advancing women's leadership across all levels of political, economic, and public life. With a vision to inspire a shift to gender-balanced leadership across all levels globally and a mission to ease access to the community, knowledge, resources, opportunities, and support women need to become effective and thriving leaders. The organization has set a goal of empowering 100,000 exceptional women leaders in Nigeria over the next decade and has successfully launched innovative programs that position women as trailblazers in advancing leadership in Nigeria and across Africa.
We now hear from the founder and executive director, Women in Leadership Advancement Network WILAN, Abosade George Organ.
Let's begin with how this all began. I mean, something must have inspired this journey of the Women in Leadership Advancement Network. How did it all start for you?
And very interesting story. So WILAN actually started as a digital community, believe it or not. And the truth is that I was thinking to myself one day, what does it take to run for office as a woman? And I did a simple search online. And what I realized was that I couldn't find anything. Like, how do you start? Where do you start? What do you do, right? I just didn't find it. So what I did was I went online and I started an Instagram page and a Facebook page. And that's how we started as a digital community to provide information for women who were interested in participating in politics. Of course, the story is history as to where we are now. But in terms of what our origin story was, we started as a digital community. We evolved into an advocacy online. We were doing a lot of online organization, information, providing, like, what should you do? Where should you go? How can you get information? Where do you start? Just the stuff that I wish I saw that I didn't see. And before you know it, I tell the very interesting story of how I sat across a donor and they were offering us money to support, but we didn't have a registered organization. And that's how we ran to formalize WILAN. And ever since then, 2018, we have been doing the work that we've been doing. Somebody will be asking, what is WILAN? So WILAN is the Women in Leadership Advancement Network. And our mission is to inspire a shift to gender-balanced leadership. But how do we hope to do that? We want to provide access to the knowledge, to the skills, to the support, and everything that women need to thrive as leaders. Some people would argue that we don't have enough women leaders, which we know is not true. However, the way we like to approach our work is there are genuine barriers for why women are not in leadership. And so we take a systems change lens to the work that we do, which means what are those things that hinder women from participating in leadership, from being decision makers, from being the ones who have a seat at the table. And so that's what we look at, right? And that's what has informed how we do what we do. And I'm sure that we'll come to that. But in terms of what WILAN is, we want to inspire a shift to gender-balanced leadership. And for somebody who's never heard that term, it just means that if Nigeria has half its population as women, then we should have half our leaders as women as well.
When we look at the milestones you've achieved so far since inception, what would you say are those things that you have done that has impacted enough lives, especially when it comes to women?
Fabulous. So the way we like to think about our work is in sort of three major streams. The first one is pipeline development, right? So thinking about leadership as a pipeline, I like to say leadership is a journey. And oftentimes that journey starts, well, whenever you realize it. But in our context, many times that's when you become a prefect in school maybe, right? And that's why for us as WILAN, we have a national head girl project, right? This is a program that we've done now, for almost 5 years. And what we do is we identify and nurture young girls, providing them access to leadership, practical leadership training, mentorship, and then create awareness on their civic rights and their civic engagement. So that serves as the beginning of the journey. And as I said, it serves as part of the people who will be in this pipeline. But we don't only serve women there, right? As I said, it's a journey, but that's where the journey begins. And then through this entire pipeline, we are offering women, whether it's training, whether it's access to opportunities, which vary in its context, right? So that's one piece of our work, the pipeline development, very important. As you know, WILAN also invests actively in media and narrative change, yes. And the reason for this, Anne, is when we started this work, we realized that, look, we were raised in Nigeria, and leadership is not something that they said women could do. We were not socialized to believe that leadership is something that women do. So we recognize that there's definitely a gap in how women are perceived that will hinder them from becoming leaders. And we wanted to contribute actively in actually shaping how people perceive women and how this perception shift happens. So through our Leading Woman show, which is now in its 4th season with over 60 million viewers, over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, we are shifting the perception that the public has of women, right? So that when a woman raises her hand and say, I want to lead you, people don't see it as odd. People don't see it as weird, but it comes naturally that, okay, let's provide her with the support that she needs. And I think the final piece of our work is really around policy influencing and this systemic change. So how do we penetrate institutional frameworks that serve as barriers or that hinder women? And we like to do this in coalition. So we're currently part of a coalition that is trying to advance women's leadership and really, really interrogate those barriers, whether those are institutional or systemic barriers. As you know, recently we were also pushing for a bill, right, that will make additional seats available for women through a constitutional amendment. So these are the different stratas of our work. And I think across these lines, we've seen impact. Another thing that I would really like to highlight is just recently, we published Nigeria's first State of Women's Leadership Report and dashboard, right? So now you have a data-driven platform that can inform women's leadership. And this is across sectors, right? So we don't want you to be blind, because a lot of times we make generic statements about women's leadership. Oh, there are no women, but oh, there are so many women. What are you really talking about? Is it data-driven? So you can now go to the dashboard, click on your state and see how many female commissioners you have, see how many women are in your state assembly, see whether there are any women representing you in the Senate or in the House of Representatives, right? You can see women across sectors if you want to streamline to like the health sector. And this is stuff that we've made available to all Nigerians. So you don't even have to be a policymaker. And for us, all these different things are working together to ensure that we can change the landscape. So we're not only working on the women, on the woman herself, or on the girls themselves, because that's at the individual level. We're also working institutionally and we're also working systemically. So that's how we see the work that we do.
All right, maybe we focus more on the projects already carried out over the years since you started this, and which ones would you look back at? I mean, sometimes it will just make you smile and say, oh, this was done, we hoped for this to happen, and it happened.
Yes. I mean, to be honest, because I've done development for over 2 decades, I'm used to waiting for change to happen. I know that change takes time. So I say that because the work that we do with these young girls from secondary school is important work, but as you can imagine, is long-term work. We've recently as well started working with the National Female Students Association as well, because as I said, leadership is a pipeline. But I think the things that have the thing that has made me smile the most is when you see a room filled with women who said, I didn't know that I had this power, because they've grown up in a system and a society that has tried to silence their voice for so long, that has tried to say, this is what you're permitted to do and not do. There's just something truly magical. And I've seen it over and over again when women come to that realization. You know, there's an Igbo proverb, I guess, that says, whenever you wake up, it's your morning. And I have seen women come into their own just because we provided them access to new information, an understanding of a skill set. Because I want it to be clear, women are already powerful and capable. A lot of times what we're doing is we are it's almost like an onion. You are peeling off and saying, you have permission. You know, is that permission? Because society had already made it like, there's a stereotype. This is what you can do. This is what you do. This is exactly. So what we do most times is make space for women to see themselves as they truly are. I think the final thing I would say is we have a misrepresented campaign, and misrepresented comes from the actual word misrepresentation, right? And what we've tried to do with our campaign over the years is highlight to people why representation matters. And somebody is going to watch this and say, oh yeah, they've come again, women and all of that. But no, the evidence shows us that there is a significant impact when women lead. And so what we've tried to do with this plugging the data gap is we want people to know what exactly the difference is between having a woman who is a commissioner of health versus having a man. Now, there is no evidence that men lead better than women or women lead better than men, but there is sufficient evidence that men and women lead differently. And so when you have an entire cabinet that's made up of only one gender, you are risking the benefits that could come from having that other perspective. And for us, what that looks like most times is that maternal and child mortality continues to suffer, because we love the men, but if you don't know, you don't know. Exactly. So if you haven't given birth, if you don't understand the challenges of childbirth, you're probably not going to be in a position to make a policy to protect a woman. If you've never had a case of gender-based violence or tech-facilitated gender-based violence, you're not going to understand how to put in policies, laws, or frameworks to protect the people who are most vulnerable to gender-based violence, right? So we want people not just to see the work and say, oh, they've come again. We want them to understand that there is an actual benefit, collective benefit for all of us as Nigerians when women are in leadership positions. And you know, what comes to mind is our security, right? As a nation, our entire security infrastructure and architecture. It is one of those spaces that is in desperate need of women's leadership, because women know how to dialogue, women understand diplomacy, and there is evidence that when women participate in peace processes, then peace actually lasts longer. So for us, we're doing these three things that I told you about around pipeline development, investing in the media and narrative change, and of course, policy and systemic influencing. And all these things are working together to pull down the barriers, so to invest in the women themselves or in the young girls as well, but to also educate the people around them, so that when somebody walks up to you and the person says, I want to run for office, the first thing you tell her is not, you don't have anything else to do, or who's going to take care of your family, right? But that you actually support her and say, what do you need and how can I help?
Talking about investing in women, I mean, I was opportune to be in the same space with the Rwandan president at the time. And I just asked him, how did Rwanda come from almost nothing to what it is today? And he had only one answer. He invested in women. So it means there's something which I believe that we do differently as women. And anyone listening to this, it's not being biased. I'm not being biased.
No, it's facts.
It is
It's based on the
facts.
evidence.
So
Yes.
what do you think the Nigerian government can do to make these things better, to put more women in leadership? There are so many campaigns who've been talking about this on the table for so long, but it looks like nothing is changing, or almost nothing is changing. I mean, so what policies, what are the things that government can actually do or take from this interview?
Look, I think there are a few things. The first one is we do need that law. Nigeria needs an affirmative action law. Why? Because the systemic barriers will take time to change. And if we were to wait for those things to change, right, then we won't see the change that we want to see in terms of more women in leadership positions. So we need a law. I mean, if you think about Africa as a continent, we're at the bottom. It's actually embarrassing, right? And there are over 40 countries on this continent who have an affirmative action law, whether that's, reserved additional seats, whether that's, making provision of a percentage out of the whole, whatever that looks like. Now, Anne, let me remind you that Nigeria has a national gender policy that it has had since 2006 that makes provision for 35% women in appointive offices. But we have never complied to that. So when you ask me what the government can do, I think it's on multiple layers. The National Assembly, our lawmakers, need to pass the law. It's just what we need. It can accelerate. Just imagine the current reserve seats bill that we're pushing for. 182 seats if that bill is passed, right? 36 at the Senate, House of Reps, and then obviously double that number at the state assemblies. It will change the face of what leadership currently looks like, where we're less than 5%. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we do have a national gender policy. It's a beautiful document. And guess what? Our challenge is always implementation, but there is an implementation plan that is attached to the national gender policy. So you don't even need to think about it too much, all right? So I think we need to implement and enforce that. So if you are a president, minimum of your cabinet women, 35%. If you're a state governor, 35% minimum. These things, they sound simple, but let me tell you, because we have seen an example in one of the Nigerian states, actually maybe in two, in Kwara, in Ekiti, we know that it takes political will and courage. And so my invitation to our political leaders is have courage. Do it, because you can. If all the governors do it, and can you imagine the immediate change of the face of leadership and how that could look? It could be really transformative. And I think that the final piece is we need to take investment in leadership more seriously. Leadership skills can really be transformational. It requires multiple layers of work, especially based on our culture and religious society. There's so many things that are institutionalized that actually hinder us from getting into leadership. And so I think the final invitation is to us as civil society organizations and what we're doing through the Women in Leadership Coalition, building alliances for accelerated progress. I think that's super important. And seeing what part of the problem can you come at. We're investing in young girls, we're investing in women, we're doing narrative change. Somebody else can be doing something else. And I think that collective power is really, really needed for us to move the needle. There is overwhelming evidence and on the economic benefits, by the way, of investing in women. Whether this because of the fact that women pay their loans, or that if you invest in a woman, she's not just going to do something that benefits only her, but she benefits her family, she benefits her community. I also think that the government should look at how they're spending. So gender budgeting is very important. I really, really think somebody needs to do that work of what percentage of the budget benefits women directly. I'm not talking of generally, but directly. And it's things like services that protect women. It's services that they have access to, right? I know when we do these loans, we say, 50% is going to women, but who follows the money and who exactly? Do you see what I mean? And we have all these women programs. And I think the final thing I'll say to this is, let empowerment stop being only about tokenism. If you want to empower somebody, there's a lot more you do than give them something. Most times, you actually have to make room for them to be at the table themselves. And then that's what we're calling real power. You know what I'm trying to say? So I feel like empowerment has also been abused as a term in our climes, especially as it relates to women.
When we talk about partnerships, I mean, there's no way you can do all of the work that
Not
you
possible.
do without partnerships, important partnerships,
Yes.
beneficial partnerships.
Absolutely.
How well do you work with partnerships to help drive your job and the goal and objectives that you want for WILAN?
Look, I think that we couldn't have, as you just said, achieved anything that we have done without people. Let me even start with people, right? WILAN has an amazing team who do this work, not because of how much we can afford to pay them, but really because they believe in the cause. And as I said, remember that this is not change that you see on an annual basis. It's a long-term change, but they believe it's possible and they are willing to invest in their time and to just partner with the organization to be vessels to do this. So I don't take that for granted. But in addition to that, as you know, we're a donor-funded organization, and I think we've been really blessed with partners who also want to see systemic change. So they haven't put pressure on us to say you have to deliver this change in 1 year or in 2 years or in 3 years, right? And that's it. I think the final thing is with the coalition. So WILAN is in a coalition with Whisker, Wimbies, and the Nigeria Governors Forum. And I think that what we have learned in the last year with that coalition is that when we come together, we really go further. I know there's a, if you want to go far, go alone, but if you want to go farther, go with others. And I think that this alliance of women's organizations that are focused on women's leadership has really, really been transformative, and I think that we've seen it. I mean, again, as I said, with our donor partners, the Gates Foundation are one of our major partners, and they've supported our work. I remember the first time I saw their strategy for women's leadership, it almost looked like a prototype of ours. And I think the best thing is when you find partners like that.
So it's almost a decade of doing this amazing work that you do. When you look at maybe 10 years or 5 years from now, where do you see WILAN Global? Where do you see it getting to and achieving?
That's such a beautiful question, and one that I cannot pretend I haven't thought about it. I think about it. As you know, our world is changing really, really fast. So we're currently building what I would call a digital suite, right? And then we've recently launched the WILAN Institute as well. So kind of all our training and programming is moving to the WILAN Institute. And for us, the vision for the WILAN Institute is to propel women forward for Africa's transformation. So that's a full-on Africa play, because we see that it's going to be inevitable for systems to actually need women. So we're ahead of the curve. They may not realize it yet, but we want to ensure that when they do, the women are there and they're ready. But beyond that, this digital suite is basically, think about tracking your leadership journey. I always say that, people say, what is the benefit of having women in leadership? We want to be able to quantify that almost. And we think that we can do that through technology. Because a woman goes on this journey. Look, the day you walk into a board meeting and it's only you and 9 men on the board, it's difficult to find your voice in that kind of environment. But I promise you, the day a woman finds her voice, we want her to be able to record that day and say, today I found my voice. And be able to say, this is what got me here. So tracking women's leadership journey is something that we hope to do. And we actually have an app, the Bird app, that is now helping. It's in very early stages, but we're testing it out. In addition to that, we also have a chatbot, right, that helps women sort of protect themselves and prevent tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So as you know, media misinformation and disinformation is one of the major things that actually hinders women from getting into leadership positions. Because the moment you become visible and they carry that fake news about you, women run. But there's a cost of running away. And so we want to be able to protect women.
So let me take it from where what you said about finding your voice,
Yes.
or a woman finding their voices. I mean, a lot of times they say women do not support women. I don't believe it.
No.
But that little girl watching you right now, thinking, how do I find my voice?
Yeah.
How do I get to this level?
Yeah.
Talk to that little girl watching you right now.
So what would I say to that little girl? I would say to her, and you know that question really warms my heart because I have two little girls of my own. What I would say to them is what I say to Michelle and Yada every day. I look at them and I say to them, you know, many times they feel like, can I do it? Right? There's always, especially as children, there's always a need for validation. I think there are two things. The first thing is that every day that I wake up, I want them to see a role model, because that is one of the fastest ways that people actually change their lives, by seeing people who look like them do things that they aspire to do. So my hope is that those of us who are visible, right, and are going on this journey of leadership can be an inspiration for that little girl, and she can see herself in us and say, I can do this too. But for that voice every day, I think that I would say to her that you should wake up and look in the mirror and say to yourself, I can be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday. We're not chasing perfection. And this concept of you're enough sometimes can be confusing to people. So I think becoming is a very interesting concept for me. And every day I wake up, my aspiration and what I say to my girls is be a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday. And as long as you continue to do that, you'll probably end up at the top.
Well, this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Kaleidoscope. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, you can watch past editions. Go to youtube.com/channels web, click on playlist, then type Kaleidoscope in the search box and enjoy your time with it. I'll definitely see you again very soon. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Thank you for watching.